I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein!
I know I'd go from rags to riches.
Why, a 4-year-old child could understand this report. Run out and find me a 4-year-old child. I can't make head or tail out of it.
Or will I go?
Faravelli, you've got the brain of a 4-year-old boy, and I bet he was glad to get rid of it.
My fate is up to you.
Out now, I'd be shitting my pants if I was you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Your List Sucks, our regularly scheduled programming. No draft this week. Everybody got used to the drafts. We're not doing a draft. We're back to top 10s. We're doing Kurosawa. Honestly, I never thought this show would happen. We planned at the beginning of the year, back in the spring when Cody said we're rethinking the entire schedule. I thought this would be the first episode that got scrubbed. A few weeks later, he's like, hey, you want to do the Kurosawa episode? I'm like, yes, please. So we went and found these guys. Great panel we got tonight. Before we get started, I'm just going to run down real quick at the top of the show. Next week, Koho's got his top 40 musicals going. He's got a solid panel for that. That's going to be basically the whole month of August. Then we got another month or a couple weeks off, I guess, to do regular shows. And then later on in the fall, we will have the top 100 scenes hosted by me. We have 3 panelists. Working third options for a fourth. So if you're interested, give me or Koho or Cody a call or a message and let us know, because we are trying to narrow that down soon, just so everybody has time to make their list. I have time to watch everything I'm going to watch. But that's either here for near for that. We're talking Kurosawa, one of the best directors to ever do it. I'm excited to talk about it. And like I said, we've got an awesome panel. Joining us is Dylan. Dylan, you were one of the first people to speak up when this came up. How you feel about tonight's show?
I feel pretty good. I mean, I'm excited to be on talking about one of my favorite directors ever, and I feel like I will do all right. But there's one movie that I'm sure everyone else will have pretty highly that just barely missed out on my list that might sink me. So I'm a little worried about that, but should be good. All
right. Next we've got John Petrovic. John, you're another guy here. Kind of new to the community. I know you've been on YLS a couple times, but I know this is something you're excited about as well. What are your thoughts going to the Kurosawa top 10?
Yeah, Kurosawa is a really important director for me, like when I was first getting into film. So I'm excited. He's one of my favorite directors. I mean, he has so many great films. And yeah, I'm just excited to talk about them. Am I going to win tonight? Almost certainly not. But yeah, I'm just excited to be here.
All right, Joseph, you and I have probably talked about Kurosawa more than I have with anybody else here in the panel or in the community. You and I have talked about a lot. So we're happy to have you here. And what are you thinking about tonight's show?
I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Fair enough. And last but not least, of course, the guy that we said we were doing this episode, we penciled in the slot. We knew he'd want to be here. Paul, how you doing tonight?
Well, I don't know. I thought this was Kiyoshi Kurosawa, so I guess I rewatched Bright Future and Wife of a Spy for no reason. But no, I'm excited to be here. Yeah, I mean, it sort of at one point became known as the Kurosawa guy, I guess, in the community or whatever. But mostly, yeah, I mean, probably my favorite filmmaker of all time, and a lot of movies that I hadn't watched in a while. And I'm sure we'll have differing lists. Honestly, I'd never come on the show to win. Like, that's just not how I do the show. I come on here to talk about movies I want to talk about, and if I lose, it's fine. But
yeah, I mean,
I'm excited.
And honestly, winning and losing isn't going to be a big deal this episode. I mean, nobody's really going to lose. This is the traditional episode. Your list sucks. Nobody's list going to suck. Obviously, we have a lot of great movies to pick from. So it's good. I know people like to see me come out here and get angry, but I don't think any of you are going to be able to make me angry with these picks. So with that said, we'll get started. We're going to start with our 10 through 8. Dylan, why are you going to get started off?
Yeah, so my number 10 is Matadayo. My number 9 is The Bad Sleep Well.
Yikes.
And my number 8 is Dreams.
Same spot for me.
All right, okay. So after Dylan talks about it, you can talk. But go ahead with your 10.
Yeah, so Matadayo, this is one that I just saw very recently this year. And yeah, I just love how simple this is. Just basically I love movies just about friendships, basically, and how this professor is so revered by his his students, that they keep in touch with them and have this long lasting friendship like throughout their lives. And it's just, very simple like storytelling. Like there's not really like an overarching story. It's just kind of mostly vibes or individual stories. And I found it really warm and just, entertaining. I think the main actor who plays the professor, I don't know the name of the character or the actor off the top of my head, but he's like so good in the main role. Just fantastic. And I think it's really interesting just as his final film in his filmography. Like I think it adds like a lot of power to where the film ends. I won't spoil it, but yeah, it's a very solid film. And my number 8 is Dreams. This one, I like how I'm kind of like highlighting his later career in the 90s with these two picks that I'm talking about, because I think he could have like settled into and just making standard like Kurosawa fare at this point, but I like how he still kept like pushing himself as a director like later in his career. And like this film I think is one of his more experimental ones, where it's just individual stories of him adapting dreams that he's had in the past. And I think it's really fascinating and just honestly like one of his more personal films as a director, like just learning, because if these are like actually based on dreams that he actually had, it's just interesting learning more about him, I guess. And yeah, there's a fantastic one. My favorite one is probably the Vincent Van Gogh one, where Martin Scorsese plays Vincent Van Gogh, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I love this film a lot. Yeah.
Paul,
Yeah,
nobody else had this besides Paul, right? You just these two guys at 8.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Dreams for me is, I don't know that it's necessarily like as masterfully crafted and like as sort of perfect, I think, as some of his other movies, but to me, it shows a lot of the sort of wide palette of his visual style and aesthetic and all the possible styles that he can dip his toe into here and there. I think like each segment has its own personality and is basically like its own thing. And if a movie like that, I think a lot of people like, there'd be a thing where you connect to some segments more than others, but to me, like the sum of the whole thing is what makes it so incredible. And it has some of his best visual filmmaking, I think, that he's ever done, honestly, especially in the Vincent Van Gogh segment, but also the segment of the man walking along the volcano, where the young boy seeing this march go on like into this village that he follows into the forest, like all these really indelible images that really stick with me. And I think it's just a unique film in film history. Like this, it's a lot of similarities to Robert Altman's Three Women, where it's literally like a movie made based on the dreams that the filmmaker had in their own life. And to me, that's always like a fascinating concept. And I just think it's such a beautiful display of like, this one is career, like his career is almost over at this point, but it's him sort of using all those years to see all the things he could capture in individual images. And I think that's really something special.
Yep. Okay, so Dylan's number 10 was Metadaya. And I'm just going to say this right now. A lot of things are going to get mispronounced tonight, mostly by me. Don't be douchey about it. Garth, if you're in the chat, I'm calling it out now. You don't have to call me out when I do it. Just everybody be cool. But this movie, I had not seen. I just watched this for the first time last night, actually. And I was really kind of hesitant going in because I'm thinking, final film of an aged director, personal story, lower stakes. I thought this could be kind of boring. And I actually loved it. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a great story. Like you said, Dylan, just about this guy and his relationship with these people. I mean, it doesn't have like the flair of a lot of the scope of a lot of his stuff that we're used to visually, but it's just such a perfect character for his kind of filmmaking, and I think it's a perfect character, like you said, to close out his career, and just like the relationships between most of the story is him talking to these students of his, and I just love it because there are points in the story where his stories aren't that interesting and his jokes aren't that funny, but it makes it even more endearing when his students still are like enthralled by everything he has to say, just how much they care about this guy and how much he means to them. I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was great. I want to rewatch this again soon. 9 got skipped, and then Dreams. Yeah, this is another one I just watched for the first time this year. It's very different than a lot of his other stuff, but that's cool. Like you said, Paul, it's towards the end of his career, and he's still experimenting with this kind of stuff. Still, it's not his first color movie, but he's very much experimenting with color. And I think this really shows off Kurosawa as an artist, like an actual like painter. I think you see a lot of that in this work. So yeah, it's not one that I'm going to go back to a lot, just because It is more of just a visual experience than it is like an actual like narrative or story. So those are the movies I don't love as much. But for what it is, it was great. So that's Dylan's bottom 3. John, we'll move on. You give us your 10 through 8.
All right, my opening salvo. I'm going to dip my toes a little bit into late style with my number 10, like Dylan, and go with Rhapsody in August. My number 9 is Drunken Angel, and then my number 8 is Hidden Fortress.
I have that at 10.
Okay, so you go after John when he talks about it.
Okay, yeah, so Rhapsody in August. If I could just open with a little bit of a story. When I was first getting into film, going to the library to check out like Kurosawa movies, there were 6 Kurosawa films. 5 of them are your typical canonical classics that are almost certainly going to show up later. And then there was this one. This one is like, it's about a hibakusha, so a woman that survives the bombing of Nagasaki, and then her like 2 generations of the same family kind of interacting with each other. And this movie was pretty controversial when it came out because it treats obviously when you're talking about the atomic bombings of Japan, it's a very loaded topic. It's very controversial, but I think it's pretty undeniable that it was a pretty terrible thing that happened, and it had like such a terrible human cost, and really literally quite changed history going forward. And anyway, the movie is about these 3 generations that grew up in very distinct periods of Japan's history. There's the hibakusha, who grew up and had to experience the bombing. Her husband passed away. I don't think that's spoiling it. There's her children, who grew up in the immediate post-war era of Japan, and then their children, or her the main character's grandchildren, who grew up as Japan was like was going through this economic resurgence. It was going through its tiger economy phase. And I think that this movie is just very powerful because you see all 3 generations of this family kind of coming to terms with what this horrific thing that happened to their country, to their family, like the legacy of trauma that it leaves, and how all 3 of them sort of process that throughout the film. I think it's something that's something unusual in Kurosawa's oeuvre. And something that I think is very, very powerful. This one also gets memed on a lot because Richard Gere is in it. Plays a half Japanese man. That's pretty funny. It's a little bit odd, but Drunken Angel. This movie is it's pretty messy, but I like it because it has so many ideas, and it's so it feels just very raw. It's one of his immediate post-war noirs. The other one, which I'm also sure is probably going to come up too. The main draw for me to this one is just the post-war milieu. That's something that I've always been interested in, and just the way, like, sort of the geography that Kurosawa can create in that film, of the black markets, of this sort of seedy Tokyo underbelly. And then, of course, there's Toshiro Mifune. I'm going to be defaulting to just talking about Toshiro Mifune a lot. He's one of my favorite actors. I didn't think it was possible for a performance to be both tubercular and cat-like at the same time. And he threads that needle really great. And, of course, he has great chemistry with Takashi Shimura, as he always does in all of his films. One other reason why I like this film is because this one, Kurosawa's post-war movies, often take aim at sort of Japan moving. It was much more confrontational with Japan, like sort of moving forward into the future. And this one has a lot of commentary, or I guess it's the most explicit Kurosawa movie where he sort of tackles like the American post-war occupation. And I think it's just not something that you see very often in his films, I feel. So that's kind of interesting. And then number 8 is Hidden Fortress. My enjoyment of this one is pretty uncomplicated. I just think it's a really fun adventure film. And it's also, like, I think it's really funny. Star Wars famously cribs a lot from this movie. Like, all of the movies in the Star Wars franchise crib from it. The whole droid dynamic, the whole adventure thing, like Episode 1, that's just basically it. I just think it's really funny. I think it's really fun. It's a little bit overlong, sure, but it has all of those like Kurosawa touches. His propulsive editing style, just these beautiful, compositions. The rain, it has everything. maybe it's his most accessible film, but it's still one of my favorites. I think I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
All right. And just for you, this as well, right?
Yeah, this was at my 10. About John mentioned the Star Wars comparisons. Aside, when I watched it, in addition to trying to see, there's that from Star Wars, the peasants are bickering like C-3PO and R2-D2, and also the whole plot of the princess going undercover to protect her identity. I agree that this movie's sense of fun is a lot of fun. I think that I like how there are some movies that I can imagine that people who aren't introduced to Kurosawa might feel daunted a bit because of length or because of plots. But I think this movie is very accessible because of how much fun, and also the action is very fun. I think Princess Yuki's the whole part of her trying to protect her identity is also very fun. I love the parts where she's not to get into too much spoilers, but the part where she's trying to not talk to the peasants, I thought it was a very interesting touch. That bonfire scene is also really beautifully choreographed. Maybe a little long overall, but it's still really, really fun.
Yep. All right. Number 10, Rhapsody in August. Only time I'll have to say this tonight, I haven't seen this one yet. Like Dylan mentioned, it's not really not available anywhere. But I do want to see it just more out of curiosity. Of all the American actors that could have worked with him, it was Richard Gere. And I just want to see how much magic if Kurosawa was able to turn the wooden puppet into a real live boy.
Oh yeah, Kirk's guy.
Yeah, because that just so somebody else mentioned in the chat. Just of all the American actors, it's Richard Gere. So definitely go check us out. And it does sound interesting. That just the story that John was describing. So as soon as I can find it somewhere, I will watch it. Drunken Angel is another one I rewatched in the past couple weeks, and this is a really good movie. The thing that struck me on this rewatch was all the musical elements. The opening prologue is almost like something out of West Side Story. You have like the music and people dancing, and then you have the guitar player through. They use that to introduce the villain, and then you have that dance scene, that just real intense, weird dancing with Ufune. So there's a lot of really cool stuff going on here, and yeah, the chemistry between them two is great. This is probably one of my top, 2 or 3 of their favorite movies together. So yeah, that's a good one. And then Hidden Fortress, like you guys said, great adventure movie. I love Mifune's character in this one. He always plays as many samurais. We talk about our cowboy actors like John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, a lot of these guys, how they just play the same character every time. Can't accuse Mifune of that. Every time he does a samurai movie, he's playing it at least a little different, and just kind of like that hard exterior, but he had that this may be like the most pure hero he's played. So I really like his character. And yeah, like you said, just those great battle scenes at the beginning, just the intrigue of them trying to sneak her around. A lot of cool stuff going on this as well. And a really great ending. I like how this ends as well. So that was John's 3. Now, Joseph, we'll move on to you for your 10 through 8.
So my 10, we already talked about, the Hidden Fortress. My 9 is Stray Dog.
That's a yes.
Okay. And my 8 is Throne of Blood.
Yikes.
Yikes as well.
Okay, Paul, move on to you.
I suspect I probably won't get to talk about mine either, but that's fine. My number 10 is Desu Uzawa.
Yikes.
My number 9 is Throne of Blood. And my number 8 is the aforementioned Stream. So we can just move on.
All right. Okay, Dylan, we'll come back to you. This is where the gloves come off, so to speak. Everybody gets to speak and talk about the picks. Dylan will do your 7 through 4 now.
So my number 7 is Throne of Blood.
That's also my number 7.
Okay. Nobody has it higher?
That's kind of surprising.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody will talk about it now. Good. You guys start, Dylan.
Yeah, so as I think I said in a movie Warzone episode recently, I'm weirdly obsessed with the story of Macbeth. It's my favorite Shakespearean play. And so when I heard that Kurosawa did an adaptation of it, I was very excited. And yeah, I think it's just fantastic. I think it's a great gateway for I know a lot of people when they saw the tragedy of Macbeth who weren't super familiar with the play had trouble with the language in it. And this is very much because they had to translate it to Japanese, and Shakespeare is very difficult to translate to other languages. They basically when they make the language the language is more easier to understand because it's not in Shakespearean when you're reading the subtitles. So if you want, like, I guess a better entry point into the story, this is a good entry into it. And yeah, I think Toshiro Mifune, I will also be talking about him a lot tonight. He is fantastic as don't know the character's name, but he is great in it. And I like how they do their take on like the instead of like the witches, it's like one like almost specter like lady in the woods who's like super creepy, and just how they do like the forest, how that comes back in the end. It's all very, very well done, and yeah, one of my favorite adaptations of this play.
John?
Yeah, John.
Sorry, I was just plugging in my charger. Yeah, Throne of Blood for a lot of the same reasons that Dylan brought up. I'm also partial to Macbeth. I spent a lot of time with Macbeth. Just throwing that out there, I mean, it's one of the better adaptations of Macbeth, maybe the best that I've seen, you know. Beyond it just being like good Shakespeare, it's also just like one of, like, in my personal opinion, I think Throne of Blood is like one of Kurosawa's like unparalleled masterpieces, judging it purely just from like a compositional like he mentioned the fog and you know, all of these just like brilliant compositions that really bring out sort of the dread that's inherent to the Macbeth story. And just to avoid running too long, because I know that Kirk has a lot of opinions about Throne of Blood, I just want to shout out Yamada Isuzu, the woman that plays Lady Macbeth. She is insane in this movie, like absolutely insane as Lady Macbeth. I love her so much. She's scary. And Kurosawa is one of his various faults, I feel, in his filmmaking, is that sometimes he doesn't really do his female characters and his actresses justice. And I think this is one of the rare occasions where you know, his portrayal, or I guess Yamada's portrayal of a female character actually like elevates the work rather than detract from it. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
And Joseph, you had this at 8, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
This movie probably will be the most famous for the arrows scene, which, not to give anything away, but once you see it, you'll know it when you see it. But it lives up to its hype. It gets crazy. I'll just leave it at that. But yes, I like the others mentioned already so far. I love how the dialogues still feel Shakespearean, despite any and probably a lot of translation difficulties that they probably might have had in feudal Japan. As I was listening to it, I was like, this feels very Shakespearean, and I like it. It just feels very intense, and as the story gets under my skin, it's really dramatic. And I also liked Lady Macbeth in this movie. She's really good. The witches scene is very creepy as well. And Toshiro Mifune's mental downfall is really, really well done in this movie. General Washizu is apparently his character's name, which I 100% looked up before I am not gonna lie.
Yeah, I had this at 9. Honestly, this probably would be higher in my personal estimation. I just knew that people would have it higher, and I would have a chance to talk about it anyway. For me, a lot of this is just about his audacity as a physical filmmaker, the things that he's willing to do, and maybe, you know, if things had gone south in a different way, maybe we'd see that differently. But I think like the way that they execute that scene, the fact that the sets are like designed on Mount Fuji, like near the volcanic slopes, like not long after it was literally erupting, is insane. There's an interesting tidbit from Brian De Palma on the commentary of Carrie, where he talks about there's a certain death scene in Carrie that is really heavily inspired from a scene in this movie. And I think you can really see the parallels there in an interesting way. But for me, a lot of this is just so base and visual. A lot of what Dylan was talking about is it distills the Shakespeare stuff into just the actions. It's not really as much about the poetry and the words. And I think that it really highlights a lot of Shakespeare's like hidden strengths as just a simple storyteller, creating conflict. I think that is inherently riveting, even beyond just his prose. And that's sort of what this highlights, and this takes like those characters to their sort of like logical extremity. And I think that's like one of the big strengths is like, it is like so base and like it's just intense, you know. This is the kind of thing, and a lot of these movies, luckily, because of having gone to film school, I've seen in a theater, and this movie in a theater is like insane. The scope is bonkers, and like they said, the music is like a different sort of level. And yeah, Isuzu Yamada is amazing. She's a really special performer.
Yeah, well said about the Shakespeare and the poetry.
Yeah.
That's smart.
I actually got to see this. Art House Theater near me was showing did a Kurosawa festival. I got to see this on the big screen earlier this year. And you're right, Paul. It's amazing. This movie is made to be seen in that format. The one of my favorite shots is the Burnham Wood shot where they're moving in with the trees. You just see that whole forest moving. I think that's the best interpretation of that scene.
You can't. I mean, no offense. You can't really spoil Macbeth. So like,
You
say anything about Macbeth. Sorry.
Yeah,
like,
it's the tragedy.
What am I going to tell you?
It's the tragedy of Macbeth. You know where it's headed. Yeah, the Burnham Wood scene, and just like you said, like the fog and just the way everything's composed, it's so great. I just love how it has and the thing I love about Shakespeare in general is how adaptable he is. How you could take his stories and place them in anywhere at any time, and they still make sense. And you get put in the hands of somebody like Kurosawa. It's chocolate and peanut butter. It's a perfect combination. But I just love how it has the kabuki influences, like a lot of the Japanese theater influences. You see that come through. So even though it is very much Shakespeare, it is also very Japanese. And Mifune is just completely unhinged in this, and his performance is so. I mean, I think he's crazier in here than he is in Rashomon. He is just so crazy, and you see that. Him going through that downfall is so well portrayed by him, and the actress who plays the Lady Macbeth character is just so great as his foil. This is my favorite. I love Macbeth too. It's one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. This is probably. One of my favorite. This is probably my favorite Shakespeare adaptation in general. I love, talking about Tragedy Macbeth. One of the things I loved about that movie is how it kind of leaned into the horror elements, and this one does it as well. I mean, when he goes and sees the witch or whatever that character is in this movie, it's legitimately frightening. And so it has so many creepy elements again. So yeah, this is definitely. I mean, I'm glad you'll have it on your list, but I think you'll have it way too low. This for me, this is definitely a top 3. But I'm not going to split hairs. Let's move on to Dylan's number 6.
I feel like this is probably going to get yikes. My number 6 is Ikiru.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So then my number 5 is Dersu Uzala.
I also have that at 5. Yeah.
All right. And you had it, Paul. Joseph, do you have this one?
I have not seen it.
Okay. All right. So we will do this now. Go ahead, Dylan, kick us off with this one.
Yeah, so this is like the second one on my list of that ones that's basically just about a friendship and mostly just vibes. Yeah, I love this movie a lot. This is the last one I saw before making this list, and I pushed off another movie which we'll probably be talking about later. But yeah, I love the main character or not the main character, but the titular character is main performance from that guy is just fantastic. He's just so endearing and just such an interesting character, and just some of I feel like some of his best photography. I feel like Akira Kurosawa with how this is all shot on location in Russia, and I believe this is his only film that he did in another language, if I'm not mistaken, entirely in another language, in Russian, which is interesting. I love the backstory of this movie, where basically, correct me if I'm wrong on some details here, where it's basically the film that he made after Dedeskiden, which was a notorious at the time for being a big failure, even though it's been sort of reevaluated recently, but and then he came back and made this movie, and basically he could have again played it safe and made another one of his stuff that he's known for, a samurai film or something, and he went out into the middle of the wilderness in Russia and made this movie, and I think it's just fantastic. And yeah, I love the main relationship between the two main characters. Just a beautiful film, and I will probably be coming back to this one a lot. So it could probably go higher with more rewatches, but it's just very fresh in my mind.
All right, John, I think you said you had this at 5 as well?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of regret putting this at 5 because I actually like this movie a lot, probably more than a lot of the canonical classics that I could sort of chickened out and put ahead of this. I think this is probably his one of Kurosawa's most underrated films. It's definitely one of his masterpieces, at least in my personal opinion. One reason why I like it so much is because it is so different. I mean, obviously it was a co-production with Mosfilm, and so it has that sort of Mosfilm look. It looks very like it doesn't have that impressionistic like painterly look that a lot of Kurosawa's other films do. It has that very like I don't really know. The only way I can really describe it is kind of like Moss film. It has like very vibrant colors, and I just love those Moss film technicians. It also feels like very differently. Kurosawa edited a lot of his own films. He didn't edit this one. I can't remember the person who did, but it gives this film a very different feel than a lot of Kurosawa's other films that I've seen. Whereas as I mentioned earlier, a lot of Kurosawa's films are very like his sense of editing, his sense of timing makes a lot of his movies like very propulsive. This one feels a lot less. It feels a lot less like it feels a little bit. What's the word for it? Maybe like subdued, hazier. It's a little bit more relaxed, and I quite like that a lot. Yeah, I guess you could call this a hangout film. That's not really the way that I read it. I mostly just see it as like Max Munzuk's Dersu Uzala's character, sort of, a man of nature, slowly kind of losing his relationship with that nature just because he's growing old. And you see this you see this like diametrically opposed ideas of like going into civilization, being pulled out of the wild. I mean, it's very basic, like literature 101 stuff, man versus nature, whatever. I'm a sucker. I find that stuff really, really compelling. And I love that last shot. I love the end. I love, like, one of my favorite shots in all of Kurosawa is just Dersu Uzala just like kind of pushed off against like in his house, just kind of like crouching almost in like a near fetal position, like in front of the fireplace, like at the very edge of frame, just like he's in a prison. And that's one of my favorite shots in Kurosawa's oeuvre. I really love this movie. It's great. I wish I had a chance to revisit it before this panel, because I think it'd definitely be higher on my list. Oh, her name is Valentina Stepanova, the editor.
Her first ever editing job. It's crazy. So I originally had this a little higher, just sort of made some tweaks to my list. But for me, I mean, this is such an important movie for Kurosawa as a person, not necessarily as a filmmaker. I mean, this comes on the heels that Dylan had sort of mentioned it, but Kurosawa has a pretty famous attempted suicide event that happens post Dodeskiden because of the failure and the sort of reception of it. And this is like such an autobiographical thing of an old man fighting against the modernization of the current climate. And I think like that feels so emotionally tied to Kurosawa's struggle with his own life and his own career. And I think like when you see Dersu Uzala move into Russia at that one point when he goes to the man's house, it's really painful to see that he just is in a world that he is passing him by and he feels like he has no grasp on it. The whole thing with where he's hunting and he sort of his reflexes are not quite what they used to be. And I think the way that shifts his life, and that's like his whole relationship with his world, right, is the way that he survives on his own. And that struggle to find a place in a world that feels like it doesn't have a place for you, I think is something that's really sad and moving. And I just think the relationship between those two men is so special, from the way that they meet, which seems so inconsequential, and to the times that they share as the years go on. I think it's like really moving to me. And I think it's one of those things where I think, you mentioned the sort of Mostrom look. It does have that, like, if Tarkovsky had different sort of interests as a person, like this is the kind of movie you could have seen him making, right? Like this sort of disparate, out in the wild. It's a similar approach to the visual spectacle, but I think it's done from a much more humanist perspective, I think, which is something that Mostrom doesn't really have too much of in their history. I don't know if people ever really know much about them as a studio or as a conglomerate, but this was a very different step for him. And Mifune was originally supposed to be in this movie, and it's weird to think of what the movie would be like because I don't know what that would even look like. It's kind of fascinating to think about, but I'm really glad that we got the version we did because it's such an outlier, but that's kind of what makes it really unique and special.
Yeah, this is one I hadn't watched before. I watched for the first time this week. This and Matadayo were the two that I hadn't seen before. And I need to go back and rewatch, I think, because there's so much here, at least on the surface, that doesn't feel like Kurosawa. It's in color, and I know he did a lot of color movies, but for me, in my heart, I always imagine Kurosawa movies black and white. And it's, it's non-Japanese people speaking not Japanese, which is just throws me for a loop. But I do think Dersu is a very, very much a Kurosawa protagonist. I think he's kind of that that Kurosawa everyman, going through the struggles that Paul mentioned. The relationship between those two is great. I didn't latch onto it because of that kind of lack of narrative once again. But I think it was still paced very well. I think you have like the segments, even though it's a little bit of a longer movie. I think it's separated into these different segments that keep the story moving along. And yeah, I think that last third or whatever when he goes back to kind of civilization is probably the best part. Very heartbreaking, and you kind of just you realize what he's destined for. So again, this is what I want to revisit. But no, everything you said about this one is pretty spot on. And Joseph, you said you hadn't seen this one right?
Correct. I do want to see it, but haven't yet.
All right. Okay, Dylan, that takes us to your number 4.
Yeah, so my number 4, this is like a personal favorite of mine. It might not be one of his objective best, but I love Kagemusha a lot.
I have that at 5 as well. Well, I have that a little bit lower at 5.
Okay. Did anybody else have it?
No.
All right, you guys go both talk about it now.
Yeah, so I saw this movie for the first time last year, I believe, and this movie just like absolutely floored me. I love just how this is again when Kurosawa makes movies in color, like he fully takes advantage of every single color there is. And there's some truly breathtaking shots in this, just how certain battle sequences are filmed where it's the characters are silhouettes and the sky is bright red, and it almost looks like, I doubt that he had any inspiration from this, but it also almost looks like panels from a graphic novel, which is weird to say, but that's how stylized it is, and it's just beautiful looking. And I love it's one of my favorite main characters in a Kurosawa movie. I love just the story of this guy who's put into a position of power after having no power, being this very lowly scoundrel basically with no power. All of a sudden is put in this position where he has to play someone who is very powerful. And I think his story throughout the film is fantastic, of where it says a lot about, I feel responsibility, and just when he, I don't want to spoil certain stuff, but I love this movie a lot. But yeah, and Tatsuya Nakadai is phenomenal, I think, in the role.
Yes, Tatsuya Nakadai is an actor that the more movies I see with him, the more I really, really like him as an actor. I want to see more films with him. His performance as this, it's actually a double performance. He's not just playing one character; he's playing more than one, and it's very fascinating to me to see that, and how his character goes to that situation shift is a very fascinating. It's very fascinating to me. I think that the plot, if you've seen the movie Shadow from 2018, 2019, it's a very it has a similar plot line where the
Zhang Yimou movie you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah. And so I saw that movie a few years ago, and I really liked it. When I saw that this is what this movie was doing, I was like, okay, yes, I'm fully on board with it. The color and the scope and the battle scenes are very, very effective and very impactful, I think, for this anti-war film. Also, I think it's a very good way to put it. It's a very anti-war film that is very I don't want to get trying not to get too much into spoilers, but the last third of the movie weighs on me a lot, and I think that's a really real powerful testament to how Kurosawa and Nakadai showed how these events unfold and how the story moves with his character trying to handle all this responsibility that he has, and then there are some things that just don't go according to plan, and it impressed me a lot. That daydream-like sequence, so colorful and really, really great, and it's majestic in a way as well.
Yeah, the way I connect to this movie the most is through Nakadai's performance. just in that dual role, like you said, Joseph. It's almost like a Shakespearean type, like a Falstaff type character, very subtly funny in a movie that's not necessarily otherwise like kind of supposed to be funny, but there's just like a natural humor to him that just plays so well with everything else going on. And I just love his interactions, and I think it's supposed to be the grandchild of the person he's impersonating. Kind of catches on to what's going on, and just their relationship is really great. And yeah, this is maybe some of Kurosawa's best use of color. Those battle scenes in the sky and everything going on is just breathtaking. This is what I'd really like to see on a big screen. I think this would just be amazing to watch in a theater. And just with the sound too, it'd probably be really, really, really cool. So yeah, and again, this is one, I'm assuming we'll talk, no spoilers, we'll probably talk about around later, but one I think is kind of a companion piece to that. Has a lot of the same themes, a lot of stuff going on, but still a great movie in its own right. John and Paul, you guys don't have this one. What are your thoughts on it?
Go ahead, John.
I haven't seen it. It's one of my big Kurosawa blind spots.
Listen, I liked it better when it was called Dave and released with Kevin Kline in 1993. No, I really like this movie. I mean, yeah, Tatsuya Nakadai, like maybe the greatest. If you take like his top 15 credits, maybe like the greatest filmography in the history of film of any actor. Like not even exaggerating. Like when like a Woman Ascend the Stairs is like not even one of your most major works. To me, that's like insane. But yeah, I mean, you guys talked about the sort of dream-like sequences, but that is like some of the great visual filmmaking of the entire 80s. And like, this is from a movie that I think is like maybe not even in his dozen best movies, which to me is more of a testament to like, I think I was watching this movie and I was like, I think this is like his 13th best movie, but also that to me makes him the greatest filmmaker to ever live. Cause this is like better than a lot of filmmakers' greatest works. Yeah, just that central performance and the way that it positions him as a figure politically, but also the way that it changes him as a person, being thrust into this role and what that means for him as the movie goes along, I think is like pretty special stuff. It's for some reason it's never connected with me on a deeper level than that, but it's an incredible movie. I mean, there's not really much else I can say about it, but it's really impressive.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of Nakadai, I mean, we'll probably talk about more of his movies later. I'm sure that he's in, coming up here, but it's funny he's never really talked about as like, in that group of Kurosawa regulars. But I think it's because he did so much outside of that scope. But
I think he is. I think real heads know. I mean,
yeah,
it's also crazy that this is Kurosawa's Palme d'Or. Like that is just a bizarre thing about in terms of his relationship with the sort of filmmaking world. It's interesting.
Yeah,
that's how I view kind of how Dersu Uzala with the first with the competitive best foreign language film. I technically there's an earlier one that won an honorary foreign language film, but yeah, that's to me, even though I haven't seen Dersu Uzala, that feels a little bit surprising to me that it took that.
Well, I mean, it feels right though. It's like the greats always get awarded either too late or not at all.
All right, and John, we're going to move on to you then with your number 7.
All right, somebody please say yikes because I don't want to lead off. My number's hold on, I need to pull up my list again. My number 6 is Ikiru. So
7.
That was
right?
my number 6.
Well,
your 7 was already thrown a blood.
Yeah, thrown a blood.
Yeah, my 7 was thrown a blood. So my 6 is Ikiru. Somebody say
yikes.
Okay, thank you. My 5 was Dersu Uzala, and so my number 4 is Yojimbo.
Yikes.
Okay, yeah.
All right, easy enough. Joseph, what's your 7?
My 7 was a yikes from earlier. The Bad Sleep Well.
Yeah, I had that earlier.
And it ends here, I think. So, Joseph, you go ahead and talk about that one.
Another Shakespeare, loosely though this time. Another loose Shakespeare adaptation from Kurosawa, and this movie has a very centers around a very complicated revenge plot where Toshiro Mifune's character is trying to avenge the death of his father under suspicious circumstances by trying to undermine the heads of the company that he works for. And when I was about to watch this movie, or when I was before I watched this movie, the 2.5-hour runtime was a little daunting to me, and I don't blame if it's the same case for other people. But as soon as I started watching, and then the movie starts going, and then it shows the extent to which his character's going with his revenge plot, it just rolls. It just flows more and gets me more riveted. It gets me more riveted as the movie went along, and yeah, that works for me as well. This movie has a very strong commentary on how on corporate crimes in different companies, and the manner of the movie shows as it goes along the extent to which the various characters did some unethical actions, to say the least, in order to take over this company. And to me, that makes it gets the stakes more serious as it goes along, and it made it more fascinating to me. And I couldn't wait to see more of what would happen next. Quick things that, without context, the cake rose and the subsequent reactions from that, when you see the whole context of it, that makes me, I think that was a very, let's just say it made me fall in love with this movie more, because I think that was a very clever way of showing how this, how Toshiro Mifune's character is trying to get back at the company heads. And also, even though it's not fully a Hamlet adaptation, I still feel like with the way that the dialogues are written and how the actors deliver it, it still feels like it has that Shakespeare touch, and I really, really like that about that. And also, not to give away too much about what the ending, but the ending is very. It reminded me a lot of No Country for Old Men, and I meant that in a great way, because I think that this movie, with the message that it's trying to give, I think that it was very bold of it to do some things that happened later in the movie. And yeah, this movie is long, but I would recommend it. I don't think it's a waste of time, because the movie just flows really, really well when you see the extent of all of the whole plot and the story. I really liked Toshiro Mifune, and the actress who plays his wife also is really great. And the one of the business administrators who reacts with the cake roast, I can't remember his name right now, but I think that his face gives the best reactions as well.
Yeah, so I had this at number 9. Yeah, I like that Joseph said that is loosely based on Hamlet, because that's one of the things I was kind of disappointed when I saw it, because it was kind of sold to me as like his adaptation of Hamlet. And there are a lot of similarities. Like, yeah, you can obviously see the influence, but they're kind of thin. But I think the movie's still like fantastic, and like, yeah, just echo a lot of what Joseph says. This is not, I mean, for me, this is not really like one that I have like too crazy insightful opinions on. I think it's just a very well crafted thriller, and I think it nails the central themes of Hamlet very well, of like just what you start out feeling bad for the guy for what he's been put through, and then he just becomes like a complete monster by the end. And yeah, I think it also handles a lot of like the themes of like post-war and stuff like very well. So yeah.
Yeah, this one for me, honestly, this one's kind of at the bottom of the list for the filmography, just because it's such a talky movie. That opening scene, honestly, might be one of my least favorite Kurosawa scenes, just because it is such an exposition dump. It's basically, here's this character, and they have this position at this company. They're just telling you who everybody is. And it really doesn't help any, because you have no idea. You don't know at that point what any of it means or why it matters. So even after you watch that scene and they tell you all that, you're kind of still, piecing things together after that. I do like the idea of the cake scene being the play within a play scene in Hamlet, and how they played around with that and kind of put that at the beginning. I thought that was interesting. But then just from there, you get, a lot of the movie focuses on like the criminal, the corporate crime and the blue collar crime, and there's so much like talking about exactly what was done in so much detail. It kind of gets a little stale for me. It picks up to me in the second half when it becomes more about Mifune's character and his relationship with his wife and what he's doing, and you see his plot kind of, picking up steam. The movie really starts going for me there. But even at the end, the big climatic incident, you're told, you're not shown. So that the movie, I definitely feel the length of this movie. A lot of his longer movies, I would not say that. Even movies longer than this, they kind of breeze by. This one, I really feel the length. So this isn't one I love, but I mean, there's still some obviously good things about it. Paul and John, you do not have this. Why not?
I think it was one of those things where I sort of expected other people to have the movie, and so I figured I would get some sort of chance. I'm honestly surprised it was on someone's this high, though. I do actually have a lot to say, and I think that the Hamlet stuff is interesting because to me, some of the most interesting stuff of the movie is how there are changes from Hamlet, right? And when you take Kyoko Kagawa's character, which is like the Ophelia character, but sort of transferred over to me. The change from her sort of disability, quote unquote, being like her madness to being a physical disability is speaking a lot to the women in this society and how they can speak their mind and have thoughts and dreams and ideals, but they have no mobility to get there. And to me, it's all about how women in this corporate era of Japan, having desires and dreams and aspirations, but a complete inability to access any of the levels of the corporate ladder. And that change to me symbolifies like the way that this is set in the modern Japanese context. And that's one of the most interesting things about the movie. To me, the whole movie, like the bad applies to everyone, right? Because the people at the top are these greedy corporate guys who are looking out to get ahead. And the people at the bottom are just trying to get revenge in any way possible. They don't really care about what the ramifications are. And to me, it's about the poison in the well that comes from this sort of greedy corporate society. And I think my own political beliefs, I think, color the way that I am able to empathize with some characters and not others in a movie like this. I don't think that I feel as bad for people who are getting screwed over by sort of underlings that have sort of been stepped on their entire lives. But to me, this is one of his most interesting films in a modern context. I think this paired with something like High and Low really speaks to what the Japanese corporate world of the post-war era turned out like, and how he just feels like things could have been so different. To me, the thing this always reminds me of is Chinatown, with the themes of corporations and with the how cynical the entire thing feels. That's the thing it always mirrored to me. And I think, honestly, this is one of his better works. And it's maybe not like a favorite, but I think it's like one of his better made films and one of his more interesting ones to talk and think about. So, John, have you seen it?
I have seen it. I tried to rewatch this for this panel because I was originally going to put it kind of lower because I haven't seen it, but I rewatch bits and pieces and I do agree with a lot of what Paul and Joseph said about it. I think it's probably one of his more searing takedowns of contemporary Japanese society. One of his better more acidic. It's not really acidic, but you know what I mean. One of his more quote acidic Gendai Geki films, and also I think it is one of his most interesting, especially the way that it sort of texturally plays with Hamlet. But I think it's also it's not my favorite of his from this sort of lens, but I think it's one of his most interesting, also formally. It's a little bit of a platitude to point out how the sort of the staging of this film and just also to defend the marriage scene at the very beginning. One of my favorite opening scenes to a Kurosawa film. I'm not going to explain why, but yeah. I like this one too. I wish I would have revisited it though, because I'm sure now that I know a little bit more both about Hamlet and Japan and film, I'm sure I'd have a slightly more sophisticated take.
All right, Joseph, that takes us to your number 6.
My number 6 is Red Beard.
All right.
So this movie is about a selfish young doctor who's assigned to work with Toshiro Mifune's character, the title Red Beard, so that he can get a special position that he wants. But he has a different point of view in working in the medical field than Redbeard does. Redbeard is a much more kind and charismatic doctor and at times serious when he needs to be. And the young doctor is kind of he's much more selfish and self-centered, and he feels very annoyed that he has to work in this environment. But seeing his character arc and how he changes through his work with Redbeard and with the different people that he meets there with different conditions or different accidents feels well. I really liked seeing how his character arc unfold through the movie. The movie is, again, a very long movie. It's over 3 hours, but I think that most of it flows very, very well because there are so many really incredible directed scenes that really stand out to me. There's this, again, not trying to get too much into spoilers, but the scene with the broken bowl astounds me with the amount of character that Redbeard has, and also the scene with the mantis, very, very tense, and things that go like oh grab very quick, and it sneaks up on you like that. But I really, really like that about it. I think that this movie is also kind of even though this movie I might describe as more uplifting in a way for Kurosawa to make because of that central character arc that the main doctor goes through. It's also kind of sad for me to see because this was the last collaboration that he did with Toshiro Mifune, and it was also his last black and white film. But I think that it's a very great way that at least they made one more really, really great movie together before they stopped.
Yeah, I really like this movie. I'm surprised no one else had it. This is one of my favorite Mifune characters, and again, just how he plays. This isn't really a samurai movie, although he does have like that one scene where he kind of kicks ass. But he plays just. I don't think he's that old at this point. I think he's playing a lot older than he actually is, and he takes on that age. That
he's not even 50. He's not even 50 when this movie's shot. It's
Yeah,
like 40, 42 or something like that.
Yeah. And he's but he takes on that like elder statesman kind of like, wise sage role. Only thing about this movie that I don't want to say it's a complaint, but the first half is kind of loaded with these vignettes about the different patients and their backstory and their ailments and what's going on with them, and they're not uninteresting, but I'm so taken by Mifune character and the character of the student and their relationship and their dynamic that anytime the focus isn't on them, I'm just waiting to get back to that story because I love that story so much. It's so great about this. I kind of wish, and I think it's based on a book, and those stories are all in the book. So again, I understand thematically they belong there. With
it's like a collection of short stories. I don't think it's like a novel.
Yeah. But it's but that's my only thing. And again, this is the one where those kind of go away in the second half, and to me, that's where the movie really starts going because you're focused completely on the two of them. And there is that scene. Mifune plays that kind of that gruff exterior, and leave me alone, don't bother me. But there's a scene where he's caring for a patient who is completely rejecting his care, and just the gentleness and the patience he has with her is just such a great moment. It just completely defines this character and defines this movie. So no one else had it. Tell me why.
I think I have a bit of a personal distaste for the movie because it led to the rift that caused them to separate. I think their collaboration, and it also prevented Mifune from taking a lot of roles in this 3 or 4 year period where he had to maintain and grow this beard and film this movie and everything. So that's part of it. I will also say, with all due respect to the man, there's a reason Yuzo Koyama is not really an actor. He's mostly a musician. If anybody's seen the movie Sword of Doom with Tatsuya Nakadai, he kind of single-handedly almost ruins the movie for me. And I don't think he's very good in this, which is, I think, why the movie doesn't really work. There's a real imbalance where the scenes where it's just Mifune really doing his thing are so great, and then it's so heavily contrasted by this young doctor that I just don't have much of an interest in that character much at all. The movie is still solid and this is better than a lot of movies from a lot of directors, but to me, this is nowhere near one of his great works. despite like the sort of towering Mifune performance. It's just one that I think I'm always going to have a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth about because of the whole split.
John or Dylan?
Oh yeah, I actually haven't seen it. I meant to watch it before this, but I haven't had the time.
This is the one that Karsten Runquist likes better than Seven Samurai, right?
I think so.
Based.
I can't believe that name was uttered on this show, John. That's a curse. That's a curse thing to say.
Okay, Joseph, that takes us to your number 5.
My number 5, we already talked about Kagemusha.
Okay.
John mentioned it, and it's time to mention this again. My 4-7 Samurai.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Paul, it takes us over to you for your 7.
I mean, number 7 is Senjuro.
All right.
I think that for a lot of people, I know that people certainly prefer Yojimbo to this because I think it's a lot sturdier. And I'm sure we will talk about it later on the show. But to me, Senjuro might be his most rewatchable and simply entertaining film. I think it's, for one thing, it's like 90 minutes and it's a real quick get in, get out, which is really nice. Like, I love his movies, but in a filmography where most things are, 150 minutes or more, it's kind of nice to get one that's a real breeze. But to me, it's also really funny and moment to moment just has this kinetic momentum to it. And it shows off a different sort of side of Mifune in his samurai sort of characterization. This is kind of like, I guess this is the last Kurosawa samurai he ever plays, which is interesting to think about. But I just love, there's that duel scene at one point in this that is such a classic, like has like been parodied almost by anime in the years to come, like for years and years, the whole like boom, flash of the sword, and all of a sudden the person is like dispatched. But I think it's really clever and very simple constructions of both action and drama, and his relationship to these men who he's helping fight back against this sort of larger structure. It's like, you could call this 11 Samurai sort of in a way, but I guess he's too towering of a figure to pass up. But also love that story where he talks about how he got his name, which is a different sort of story than in Yojimbo, I suppose. But and their whole plot with the flowers when across the water, I think all that stuff is just really fun and entertaining. And I think it's like there's something to that, just to a movie that is like easy to just pop on kind of whenever. And this is probably the Kurosawa movie I've seen the most times. Just because this is kind of like the stuff that me and my dad like to watch together. So, yeah, I think it's just really great and awesome and like a way better version of this kind of movie that I think a lot of other filmmakers make in this time period. It's just, yeah, it's a breeze, and I just can pop it on at any time.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said about it. Technically, Yojimbo is the better film, but I think this one is a lot more. I think this is personally probably Kurosawa's most accessible film, just because it has like the action. It's very action oriented. It has a very straightforward plot. Where with Yojimbo, you have the different factions and you have the different subplots. So this was a lot more easy to follow. If someone asked me, where should I start? I'd start here, because even though it's technically a sequel, there's no like chronology to it. You can watch it whatever order. But yeah, like you said, it's just this might be his most fun movie and his most like breezy, entertaining movie. And like you said, like most of his movies are a very hearty meal, and it's nice to just get a little bit of a snack. And it's a movie. I mean, it's a great snack. But that's basically, compared to the rest of his filmography, what this movie is. And not to disparage it anyway, because I love it. I think it's a lot of fun. Yojimbo is one of my favorite. And I love the character. I think this is probably my favorite of all. I've said this, a lot about him, but my one favorite character. I'm glad they brought it back. And just his interaction, putting him in a situation, in Yojimbo, pretty much everybody's a bad guy. And they're all like on equal footing in that world. And this one, he's basically dealing with children, and with innocence, and him trying to get them prepared to deal with the kind of people he's dealing with Yojimbo. So I just like that dichotomy.
By the way, James Cameron, eat your heart out. This is the greatest action sequel ever made. That's my piece.
Everybody else had Senjuro. What was everybody's thoughts on it?
This movie was close to making my list. There were some other movies that I wanted to watch prior to going on this show, and this one fell through. But I do really like it. I agree that it's a very accessible movie to introduce to others that want to go into Kurosawa. I like the very straightforwardness of it, and again, I think the action scenes are a lot of fun, and that last scene, if you're patient enough, it's rewarding.
This did not come close to making my list, but I do think it's very good. I mean, for me, I know this might sound weird considering I have movies that are like twice its length higher than this, but I feel like this one for me takes a little bit to get going. Like I'm not crazy about maybe like the first like act or so, but once it kicks in, I mean the action's like fantastic, and that final scene, not just like the action moment that everyone remembers, but and is the most iconic thing from this movie, but like the conversation that he has with like the main people that he's like trying to protect throughout the movie. That conversation that he has before he departs is like fantastic. So yeah.
John, did you talk about this one yet?
Oh, am I dead?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Fine.
Yeah.
Maybe he can't hear us. Who knows?
Oh,
seems as though.
Oh, okay. I'll just talk.
You're good. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean.
Keep going.
I didn't really pinpoint where. I didn't really pinpoint where in my ranking it would be, but Yojimbo is my number 4. Let's just say Sanjuro's there in spirit. I'll echo the sentiments from everybody else. I like it for all the same reasons because it's short, it's action packed, it has that fun finale, and also it's very funny. Like maybe his funniest movie. I don't know. I love all those little bald headed little samurai boys just like popping out from under the floorboards. It's funny.
All right. So that was Paul's 7. What you say?
My number six is Seven Samurai. I'm sure that's it.
Yikes.
My number 5 is Ran.
Yikes.
And my number 4 is Yojimbo. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yikes again.
Okay, in the top 3, Dylan, what is your 3?
Well, I think I just yikes all of them, but my number 3 is Yojimbo.
That's also my 3.
All right, I think everybody else said it already, so we'll talk about it now.
Yeah, so my top 3 are like all gimmies, but Yojimbo I think is fantastic. I mean, I like how, Kurosawa's mostly like a very like optimistic filmmaker, and this film I feel like is like an interesting outlier where it is, to borrow a phrase that John said earlier, I think it's like one of his more acidic films where it's like basically him like the character of Sanjuro coming in out of nowhere, and he's like into this one town and like manipulating these 2 rival factions is like very like entertaining to watch, and how I guess almost nihilistic it is, but it's like just such great action scenes, just great like character moments. It was one of my first introductions to Kurosawa, like, and it couldn't have been like a better introduction I feel like for his work. But yeah, I love this film a lot.
Yeah, similar to how I watched The Hidden Fortress, trying to see all the connections with Star Wars, seeing this movie made me appreciate more and more how, in a way, because technically Sergio Leone totally stole this movie for a fistful of dollars. But anyway, it was still seeing how it all came together for this movie, how it would later be used for a fistful of dollars. I think the cinematography can be really stark, and also that shots where Tatsuya Nakadai's character, again, Tatsuya Nakadai in this movie is really great as one of the big bad guys in this. That scene where he's like where he just has this evil smile, and then there's a building on fire behind him that just gets me that gives me chills whenever I see it. And that whole plot where Sanjuro is trying to get the 2 gangs to turn against each other, the stakes as the movie goes on, the stakes just feel that they get higher and they get more serious, and how they all escalate in the last 15 to 20 minutes or so is very intense, but also very satisfying when we get to the end. It's a lot of great things that I had heard about Kurosawa, and before I got into these movies, and it's still one of my favorite ones.
All right, John and Paul, you both had this at 4. So if you're with us, John, why don't you go ahead first? Okay, looks like he's not. So Paul, why don't you go ahead? Hopefully, John will be back.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's not like the Beatles where John's disappeared and Paul left alone. I mean, this is, I think, the first one I ever saw as a kid, which I probably shouldn't have been watching this as a kid, but that's sort of a thing for another time. To me, this is like his greatest accomplishment in terms of tone control. The way that the movie flips back and forth from being deathly serious to being incredibly funny. The whole gag where the guy is like counting the amount of coffins that on each side, and he's like looking at his hand at the 2 and the 4 is just like hilarious. And just this character, I think, like creates the ultimate archetype for, movie action heroine, heroes for the next, 50, 60, 70 years. And I think you see all the hallmarks in small but like simple actions and movements that he does. When he walks in to the man at the restaurant, and when he's getting sort of the lay of the land, how little he's talking and how much of it is him looking around visually, and how much of that is just him as this one figure. Anytime he's in the frame, everything else just seems so insignificant. Even when they're the men of the same height, the stature is just very different, I think. And you can see how he moves so much more fluidly than everyone else, and that it's just like he is clearly a cut above these random men. And obviously they find that out firsthand. And, they sort of clown on him at first, and they sort of, they, as the kids say, they fuck around, and they end up finding out near the end of the movie. But yeah, it's just the ultimate, like, sort of, lone man in this town. And I love the way that he plays the two sides against each other. I think that's just intermittently, like, just hilarious. And yeah, this is a movie I can watch over and over and over again. And it's just a character I find I feel like cool is sort of an overused term, but this movie is fucking cool. And like, it's just awesome. And it's like, it's a stupid and unintelligent thing to say, but like, this movie just has that it factor of just feeling like, yeah, like this is just sick. And yeah, that's about it.
You hear, John?
I think so.
You're good. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I like Yojimbo. Obviously, it's my number 4. I don't know if I like it more than Dersu Uzula, to be honest with you. But Yojimbo is the one of the Kurosawa movies where it's just like, I like it so much because it's just so sort of satisfying to watch everything kind of come together. Just sort of like the machinations of the plot. Like they alluded to, the like putting these two gangs against each other, watching how that unfolded originally, and then watching like that famous climactic battle at the end. And like Sanjuro is like very, very funny, and I feel like Yojimbo is just about as funny as Sanjuro. Has like all those little fun moments, like the dog kind of running with the arm in his hand and whatever. Just for the sake of saying something slightly different from everybody else, because I'll echo all of those sentiments. I like Yojimbo for all the same reasons. I guess it's not that much different. Yeah, I love like Toshiro Mifune's like performance specifically here. I feel like it is different from a lot of his others, not just because like he does have that it factor. He's so cool, but just like there's something gesturally like just different that he does in this one. And I don't really know how to articulate it, but like it's just so different. Maybe Paul, you can help me out here. There's just, I feel like there's something very unique about his performance, and it's not something I'm currently in like a mental state to try and articulate. But yeah,
I mean, maybe this is not the case for you. For me, a lot of it is how little wasted movement he has. Like his hands are just resting inside of his coat the entire time, and he doesn't even feel the need to brandish them unless it's absolutely necessary. And to me, it's like that he knows it feels like he calculates exactly how many steps he needs to take to get from this place to the other place, and there's no wasted movement. It's all simple and like so streamlined and straightforward that he's like mastered everything physically about himself as a person. And also, I forgot to mention the score. The score is amazing.
Sorry.
No, I think you're right. I mean, just like the shoulder roll and the scratching, and just how the character is constantly agitated. That's what I love about it. Like he's just constantly mad. I put it that in the top of the intro here. You see the scene where he gets to that. He pulls a sword and he spins around before he knew he's slashed 5 people, cut the one dude's arm off, and then in one fluid moment he just puts his sword away and he just walks away like angry that he made him, like he had to waste his time doing that. I just let this is my favorite Kurosawa movie, and it's because of this character. Centrally.
I wonder why you would identify with this character, Kirk. It sounds so unlike you.
But I've made like probably half a dozen D&D characters based like just ripping off this character and taking the opportunity to play as Mifune and Yojimbo because it's so much fun. And yeah, the story's great, but just him, like the way it's almost like you get the sense he's doing this because he's bored. That scene where when he set them off against each other and he climbs to the top of the bell tower just to watch, and he just got that smile on his face like he's really going to enjoy this. And just how, like you said, Paul, like he's just one step ahead of everybody. Just you walk in and everybody's so terrified of everybody in this town, and then you instantly realize how head and shoulders he is above. He's 10 steps ahead of everybody at all times. And it's so effortless. Like he's not even really trying. That's just who he is. And yeah, what's his name is the villain is so. I just love how like the big thing in this movie is a pistol.
Tatsuya Nakadai.
Yeah, Nakadai. When he put like that scene where he just like pulls out the gun and gets that smile on his face, and like that's the whole thing is like the big bad in the movies is like, oh, he's got a pistol, so we got to watch out for that. That's just such a cool little conceit. But yeah, this movie again is so much fun. This is probably the one I've watched the most. Just again because I am riveted. I love Mifune and pretty much everything he does. But this one just takes the cake. I'm riveted every second he's on screen for this movie. And yeah, like you said, Paul, the score is great. The standoff again, I have that in the intro too. Just a great moment. Just with the wind blowing, it's just been done to death everywhere else. But it's so good. It's so good. I love this movie. So that was Dylan's number 3. Let's move on to John's 3.
If he is here, which is up for debate.
All right. Well, I could tell you that his number 3 is going to get yikesed. So we can move on to Joseph's number 4 or number 3.
Number 3 was Yojimbo.
Okay, so Paul, that takes us to your number 3.
My number 3 is Yikes from earlier. I think a movie that I at least half the panel I assume will not have. My number 3 is Stray Dog.
I had that earlier.
For me, I think part of the reason I love this is because it is like the creation of so many movies that I love that have come after it. It is like essentially like the inception of the buddy cop movie in a way. And a lot of it is a pretty simple conceit, right? It's a policeman. He loses his gun. He's worried about what is happening with the gun, and he follows after it. But to me, what transpires is just like this descent into this underground world that this young cop doesn't really have a firm grasp on. Where people are meeting, the way that people are moving. I think there's the little touches that make this really special. One thing is I love movies where everyone is sweating their absolute ass off at every single frame. This is so similar to something like Do the Right Thing or something like Key Largo or like Body Heat, where like every frame you just feel like characters just like they want to pass out, like they need something to drink at all times. And the city just feels hot. Also, I love the simple things like they have a book of all of the pickpockets and they all have their own style. There's literally a guy known as like the train pickpocket, which is hilarious. But a lot of it's that relationship between Shimura and Mifune and the young and old cop and the ways that his sort of family life has resigned him to one ideology and the way that the young cop thinks something totally different and how they play off each other's strengths and evolve from there. Memories of Murder, I think, is a movie that's really indebted to this. The relationship between those two men, the way that it changes as the case progresses, the way that one opens up the other to a certain line of thinking and how it sort of reverses as well. But just those interactions with him and all these people he's interviewing and how he's trying to discover, what is happening and that guilt that he has of what's being done with his weapon and the idea that he blames himself despite obviously he's not committing the crimes or anything. That stuff is always fascinating to me. And also, like, as a big baseball fan, it's exciting to see a baseball scene in a Kurosawa movie where they're just at the stadium and there's this whole hijinks. But to me, again, like, I just love detective movies and mysteries and this sort of untangling crime epic that sort of spans time and space and has people sort of like descending into the underbelly of whatever city they live in, and I think it's got all of those hallmarks so effectively. And it's like this is Kurosawa post-war reckoning, finally, I think, with the Western influence on Japan. Fun little tidbit for Kirk, who I know just watched the Godzilla movies, but Ishiro Honda, the director of all the Godzilla movies, is like the assistant director on this movie. And I think they said he had a lot to do with a lot of the tactile hand stuff where they're in this middle of the city, where he just took a camera, hid it inside of a box, and walked around with Toshiro Mifune and filmed stuff, which is why that stuff feels so different to the rest of the movie, because it's like, it's really like boots on the ground. This is what like Japan was really like in this time period. And like that snapshot is fascinating to me. Amongst litany of other reasons, but to me, like that, the movie's really, really special, and part of it's because it's so in my wheelhouse. But I think it's just it's a testament to like how this is sort of his first, in my mind. I know Drunken Angel is a great movie, but his first almost major work in his career, and it sort of elevates him from one level to the next.
And Joseph, this was your number
9.
Yeah,
this was my 9. Yes. Speaking of stray dogs and sweaty stray dogs, I'd like to add Dog Day Afternoon to the sweatiness.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly.
Where they're sweating a lot. Yes. Okay. So for me, this is just a thing for me. A lot of Kurosawa films released before Seven Samurai. For me, I have a bit of a problem trying to get into them. There's just something about the pacing that gets me a little bit for some reason. But I think this movie has the best job at not only having a better pacing, but also having a more investing story. I think there's the very, like Paul mentioned about how it's kind of like the invention almost of the buddy dynamic. I love the dynamic between Toshiro Mifune and Takashi Shimura. And also I really like how Toshiro Mifune's characters, if I had to pick one that's the most different from all of his performances in Kurosawa's films, I think this might be my pick, because he's not unhinged yet. He's not this self-assured badass like in the Sanjuro films. He's a very understatedly vulnerable policeman who's trying to get back his gun. And there are some parts also that make me smile in this, because there's just things that, to me, make it seem like Kurosawa just spent some frames focusing on small things that I feel like have some sort of meaning to the movie. There's this one scene where Mifune and Shimura are trying to solve the case, trying to find his gun back, trying to get his gun back. And they go to Shimura's family, and he just finds, Kurosawa just focuses some frames on a shot of a toy horse. Just on a toy horse on a table. I don't know. I feel like maybe this is just me overthinking things, but I thought that was a good symbolism to show that the two detectives are kind of stuck in their case, and they're trying to find out how to get unstuck. And I don't know, that made me like it more than other earlier Kurosawa films. I think this might be my favorite earlier Kurosawa film.
Yeah, I'll echo that last part. I think this is even though this is their first, this is the first of working with
second,
Mifune, right?
Technically,
Drunken Angel. Drunken Angel.
Yeah. Okay, all right, okay. Yeah, this one though is, I think this shows the range that Kurosawa has, and that Mifune and Shimura have. They are just so, they can do anything. I mean, I love that this movie, at least at the beginning, is so small stakes. It's just basically like almost like just a dumb screw up that he makes, and his motivation, for the first third of the movie maybe is just nothing more than embarrassment. He feels dumb for having lost his gun, and he wants to get it back just to make up for that. But obviously it evolves from there. But like you said, Joseph, just that buddy cop dynamic between the two of them, and this may be my favorite team up with Mifune and Shimura. I just love and I think it's because the ages they are here. Because Mifune is so young and he's playing so young, and Shimergis is that older cop who and again, it sets that template. I don't know if it had ever been done before, but it feels like this is the beginning of that template where he's hot headed and just wants to move. Let's get it. And Shimer's like, just calm down. Let's go to the baseball game and check things out.
That's also like their dynamic as movies, like as actors. Like Shimura is this sort of like demure, calm, chill, relaxed, and Mifune is more intense and go get him. And I think it's kind of funny that like buddy cop movies in the future did the same thing, where it's just playing on the persona of the actors, which is like crazy to see in its early form.
Yeah, but like you said, like that baseball scene is great. Just little things like that, and again how it evolves from there, and the story gets more tense, and the stakes get higher, but it maintains that same like energy throughout. So I love this one. Again, it's not a movie when you think about Kurosawa, you don't think about like a buddy cop drama, but it's fantastic.
When I first heard about Kurosawa, I didn't know about this movie until like years after I had heard things about Kurosawa. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. All right, Dylan and John did not have this. What are your thoughts on Stray Dog?
I'll just pipe in real. Okay, yeah, I'll just pipe in to say that I haven't seen it yet. So
okay,
no comment.
Yeah, I enjoy this movie a lot. This is, I think, probably his first like capital G great film. Like I don't think. Like, I think his 1940s run is a very spotty. Like, I think it took him until, like, the 50s before he started, like, basically batting 1,000 for me. Like, everything after 1950, I at least really enjoy, from what I've seen, at least. But, yeah, I think upon rewatching it recently, I feel like this one would make an interesting double feature. I've never tried this before, but I think it would make an interesting double feature with Bicycle Thieves, considering like the kind of similar story of like people losing an item that they need for their work, and it's like post-war themes, even though from two different cultural perspectives. I think it's very fantastic. I love how, like we mentioned it a lot, but how a lot of the conflict is just internal. Like when he's initially revealing to his boss that he like lost the gun, you think it's going to be like this big moment where he gets like chewed out or something, and the guy's just like, okay, well, go find the guy, basically get it back. And is like a lot of it's just like he wants to do the job right, and he feels guilty about it, and which I think is like a really, really interesting take on that story. But yeah, I love it a lot.
Hey Dylan, quick question: which would you watch first, Stray Dog or the ultra depressing Bicycle Thieves?
I like Bicycle Thieves a lot, so I'd probably go Bicycle Thieves.
I am amused at the idea, and I don't know if somebody brought this up while I was gone, that like, such dramatic stakes could be made just stuff. Like just such dramatic stakes could happen just because of like a missing gun, just given like everything. Yeah. It's like
that's what I love about just how it kind of just spreads out from its one little dumb thing to just what it is at the end. Okay, that is the number 3. So Dylan, your number 2.
Yep, so my number 2 is Ron.
Yikes.
John, you're number 2.
Oh, John, you didn't get to say your 3, but Kirk did say it was yikes. We don't know what it
his John's number 3 was Ron. Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. Yeah, John. Yeah. What's your number 2, John?
My number 2 then, High and Low.
That's yikes.
Okay.
That is also my 2.
All right, and Paul's yikes to that. And then Paul, what is your number 2?
My number 2 is Akira.
That was my 5.
Did everybody have this?
That was my.
I did not.
You didn't have. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I think this is what would happen if Frank Capra was a good filmmaker. Just kind of. But to me,
what did he say?
This is a movie I can't watch very often at this point in my life, because honestly, it's kind of difficult for me on a personal level. Like, my dad doesn't have cancer, but my dad is like an old Japanese man who is at the point in his life where he is like reflecting on all the things that has come before. And I think like it's kind of a heavy burden sort of when it's thrust upon you in this specific way. But I love the way that Kurosawa reckons with this man's life. And it's the sort of thing where it's like, when you're at that age, you don't necessarily, especially working this kind of job, right? Where you're just a regular bureaucrat. Unless you're confronted with this sort of thing, you don't necessarily think about what has my life amounted to? Have I done anything of substance, right? And I think I love that this one event, which obviously is a very sad and tragic thing, allows him to look inward and outward to what the things he's put out into the world, the way that he's his relationship to his family and how that has changed in mostly negative ways over time, and how it's symbolized by this park, right? And that just this scene of him singing, sitting on the park bench is like, to me, like some of the hardest I've sobbed in a movie ever, really, especially the first time I watched it. I don't think I was really fully emotionally prepared for what that kind of thing would do. But it's just such a towering performance. And I think it's like, it gets a little repetitive to just be like, this actor was amazing in this movie, because like his actors for the most part are amazing in all the movies. But to me, this is probably like the performance of any Kurosawa movie that Takashi Shimura turns in here. The way his lip quivers, I think sometimes when he's sitting and reflecting on his life, and when he overhears men talking about him or sees people, his impact on other people, right? His relationship to this kind of younger woman. It's just hard. It touches on an emotional and humanistic level. I think that is some of the stuff that Kurosawa is best at. I sort of regret not putting on One Wonderful Sunday to my list, but that hits a lot of the themes I think that this really hits too, in terms of what is appreciation versus what is a desire to have made more of an impact on the world and to have more mobility. But my God, like this is just, it's just so emotionally dense that it's a difficult film, I think, to process at times. But it's just an astounding achievement to me of humanism, and it's like the peak of this is like the best version of this kind of movie, which can get sentimental very quickly. And like, I can be pretty cynical about stuff that's made in this sort of tone and with this sort of like emotional approach. But I think like when you execute it to this level, when the stakes are simple and personal and direct, it just melts me into a puddle. And I think it's one of those movies that will stick with me for a long time. And I can't really watch it very often, but when I do, it's like a whole sort of event, I think, to me.
All right, and John and Dylan, I think you both had this at 6.
Yeah, I'll go first, I guess. So this one took me a while to get to because of just like the subject matter. It's like I'm in terms of cancer dramas, it's not something I really get all that excited to watch. I kind of need to be in the right mood to watch it. But for this one, I think I'm really glad I did eventually get to it, because it actually, for as bleak as like I guess the story and subject matter is, it like actually like filled me with a lot of hope. I feel like, and I think that is just a testament to the filmmaking of Kurosawa. I feel like he does, like, to go off of what Paul said about like the sentimentality of it. I feel like he does like sentimentality in his movies like in a way that not many other directors, if any other directors at all, really have a handle on. Like he just knows how to make it like feel very authentic and not like fake or cheesy in any way. No comment on the Frank Capra thing though. I like Frank Capra, but I do
too.
Yeah, I love this movie a lot. This could probably go higher in the future, but it's one that I again didn't see till very recently.
Yeah, this one's lower. I think I'm underrating this on my list, partially because I haven't seen it recently, and also because I tried to rewatch it for this panel, and I couldn't, because what my parents, I'm getting older. I'm watching people that I love get older, and my parents, right at the beginning of COVID, had cancer, and I kind of got to see that kind of transformation happen, and it was just like really hard to revisit. But yeah, I mean, when I saw it for the first time, I liked it for most of the same reasons you guys have said. I mean, it's just like so raw and emotionally honest, and whatever. Reading about Japan trying to dig itself out of its blah 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 blah. Who gives a shit? It's. I also like Frank Capra, but you're right, Paul. 70% of the way.
Yeah, I mean, last time.
Go ahead.
Good. No, go, John.
I'm done. I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. No, it's funny because last time I watched this, I did make that Capra connection. Like, oh, this is like Kurosawa's Capra movie. Not as sentimental, and I like Capra too. I'm not. So that's a bonus for me. But yeah, I think this is definitely Shimura's best performance. he's not asked to carry a lot of these movies. For him to be the central focus on this, I mean, he's in almost every scene. No, I take that back because like the last third he's dead. But the beginning of it, the first probably 2/3. Yeah, but well, I mean, I think he gives you his performance. He gives you so much more than sadness and grief to deal with, because of how much, just how quiet he is through everything. The way he finds out he's sick, and the way he, the way he deals with his kids, his son, and the way he's treated, the way how he just kind of accepts it. So you don't just feel sadness, you feel anger, you feel frustration, you kind of put you in the shoes of someone in that situation. And I think he does so much that just with his his expressions of his face, is the way like he's got that hound dog look, and then like Paul said about like just the way his mouth moves. Like you're just waiting. Okay, is he going to stand up for his? He's going to say something now, and you just wait for it to happen. So I do think that's I think that's just a great performance. This is probably top 5 for me. And again, it is such a different movie, but it is just so heartfelt and so real and so visceral. And yeah, those the 2 scenes of him singing are just devastating for different reasons. But this is fantastic. Joseph, you're the only one not to have it. State your case.
Yeah, this is probably just a me thing and my expectations going into this. But when I was watching it and when I learned about it, I guess I was expecting too much of a Capra-like Kurosawa film. And I think that there are. I don't disagree with what you guys were saying. I know, Paul. I know. But like, I don't disagree with what you guys are saying about Shimura's performance. I think that that scene in the bar where he's crying, that scene is really great. The swing scene is really great. It's just me not really getting what I was expecting, and I don't disagree that there's a lot of hope in it. And then the ending happens. Not to spoil what happens, but the ending, this movie carries out its message in a way that I did not expect it, in a much more challenging way that I was expecting. Maybe a rewatch will do it, but I already mentioned that there's just a thing for me in trying to watch pre-Seven Samurai Kurosawa where the pacing just feels a little bit stilted more, and this movie feels so long to me. I know there's a lot going on, and I agree that there's a lot of stuff going on, but the scenes where he's trying to find things to do for himself before he tries to help out the women and the playground made me feel more impatient about what's coming up next. It's just a me thing. It's probably my hottest Kurosawa take, that I don't love this movie. I didn't love this movie as much as everybody else did, but I'm sure that if I rewatch it, there's a lot more that I would get out of it, because now I see the whole picture. But yeah, that's why I don't have it.
I wonder if that will play differently for you when you're not under the age of 30 years old, is all that I'll say. I wonder if that would be different.
It's possible. All right, that brings us to our number ones, and if you've been paying attention, not going to be a lot of surprises here. But Dylan, what is your number one?
Pretty safe pick, but my number one is Seven Samurai.
All right.
Hot takes over here.
Yeah.
That's also your number one, right, John?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. So, and I think everybody had this. So go ahead, Dylan. You can start us off.
Yeah, I mean, this was my very, very first Kurosawa film, and also the first Criterion Blu-ray I ever bought. And I remember the day when I first watched it, it was like I had like maybe 3 hours and 45 minutes before I had to go to work, and I was like, I'll see if I could get through part of it, and then because I like to have a little bit of time to do some stuff before. I go to work, but then I ended up watching the whole thing because I was just completely enraptured in it. Like I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Like this movie is just, it moves like it never drags for me at any point in this film, even though it's like 3.5 hours long. Like I feel like it's just an absolute breeze. And just watching, like, again, this is one I feel like is also, maybe I have too broad of a definition of hangout movie, but I feel like the most of this movie before the actual battle is like kind of like a hangout movie between the characters and like assembling the group.
I think it's like getting the crew together more than hang out.
Yeah, I guess. But anyways, I enjoy that aspect of it a lot. I mean, Toshiro Mifune obviously is Kikuchio's, that's his name, right? Probably pronounced it wrong, but yeah, okay. I think he is fantastic, and like he brings such a different like element to the group where everyone else is like the more proper put together like samurai, and he just comes in like completely drunk. You can tell he's there mainly for himself, but and just the final battle that it all leads up to is just like amazing. Like it's a phenomenal action just in the final climax of the film, and just spectacular shots. Like, yeah, this is, I think it's the peak of his directing, I feel like, and it'll forever be like just one of my favorite movies in general.
John, this is also your number one? Is he frozen again?
You
All right, we'll come back to him. I think who had this next?
Joseph, I think, had
Joseph, this is your 4.
Joseph is muted.
You're muted.
Iconic.
Yes. I turned into Cody for a moment. This movie is 3.5 hours long, but it goes by super, super steady. Yikes. But yes, this movie, it also was my first one. And this movie feels, even though there are other Kurosawa movies that I might like more, I feel like this movie is the most fleshed out of all the movies that I've seen anyway, because the whole procedures of them of getting the 7 samurai together, but also making the villagers actual characters instead of just brief roles. They do get a lot of screen time, and they also get a lot of I like the sense of community that they have, and all the whole progress of them trying to plan out the way that they're going to protect their village from these oncoming from the thieves. And the movie, I think, for it to be this long but still have enough place for development and have it be exciting, and also having this not feel like there's wasted time. Sure, it's long, but there's not really much that I would take out of it because it all fits together in the end. It lives up to the hype that I would definitely say. Is that I understand that if people would be a little bit cautious about going into it. This was the first Kurosawa film that I watched, but I can understand if it's a little daunting because 3.5 hours, yeah, but it doesn't feel like that. I can't recommend it enough.
Do we want to bring John back in because he's, I think, here now, and it was his number 1.
All right,
so he deserves to talk about.
Hey,
yeah, good, good.
Sorry again about the connectivity issues.
No worries.
All right. Can I just say before I give the most basic bitch take ever, that it's kind of refreshing that none of us had Rashomon on our list. I think that's cool. Anyway,
I was relieved to see that I wasn't the only one.
Well, no, that's just how you remember it. That's not how I remember it, John. I think Dylan had it on his list. You know,
good one.
I thought I was gonna be the only one. Oh my gosh.
That was a big surprise for me. I expected to see it somewhere.
No, I'm okay, anyway. Yeah. I think this is my entry point into Kurosawa, and also largely just into kind of like art film and like foreign film, I guess. An impressionable like freshman in high school, just going to the library trying to explore the DVD section there. I think I revisited Seven Samurai. This is the only one that I managed to actually rewatch, I think. Yeah. I think there are movies that in Kurosawa's filmography that are probably more interesting textually, maybe even more impressive formally, but I still think it's impossible to overstate like this movie's greatness. Sorry, I think it's a perfect film. A lot of that just does. A lot of it has to do with like just it's just like such a rousing action film, just the way that it's put together. I don't want to belabor like all of Kurosawa's sort of like tourist aesthetics, but it's all pretty much like, and it's all on display here, and it's probably as good as he gets, minus maybe one or two other movies that I can think of. The whole Bushido thing, sort of coming to grips with it of like the decline of Bushido and the samurai way, that doesn't really do much for me anymore. But I guess it's still interesting to watch, like, these heroic swordsmen, like, you die like pigs, getting shot, stuff like that. Like, it's something I forgot about this movie. Revisiting it is just how fucking bleak it is. Like, it is dark. I wish I had more smart things to say about it, but yeah, it's very important to me. I think it's probably just the best action movie ever. Yeah, sorry. Basic take, I know, but it's it's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a movie that's hard, and I think honestly impossible to talk about without superlatives. The best this, the greatest this, but like that is because to me, like, it has the strength to bear that on its shoulders. And like a lot of movies over time have been labeled, right, the greatest film ever made, and I think sometimes over time they buckle under that weight. But I think this is one of the ones that I think has stayed true, and I think that's because not just of its immense scope, but its care. And, one of the things that's, written by people that are a lot smarter than me, but Kurosawa's composition of movement within multiple levels in the frame in something like this is on display more than in any other movie. And it's just insane when you see how people in the foreground and in the background are independently making different movements that I think speak to character as well as scene and composition and image. And speaking of image, like, not to give too much context, but the image of the hilltop is, like, to me, one of the great images in cinema history. Like, it is one of the, like, ultimate, like, and this is one of the ultimate, like, this is why movies exist sort of things, where it captures something that is, in conception pretty simple as a story mechanism, but I think has this immense weight behind it because of the people that are making it, because of the actors, because of the way that the characters are positioned, not just versus each other and with each other, but also against movies that around the time. Like, if you compare this to other, quote, action movies of the 50s, they just can't hold a candle. They're not even in the same conversation. Like, this is also more kinetic than most modern and 80s, 90s, and 2000s action movies. And I think that's a lot of that's a testament to just, like, this is, like, the sort of the peak of his craft. I literally have written in my notes, like, number 6, Seven Samurai, this is probably stupid to have this low. And it probably is, and it's probably just me being too cute with my list or whatever, and maybe this is why, quote, lose or what have you. But there's other stuff I just want to talk about. But I knew that people would talk about this because this is, like, one of the great films ever made. And it's like, this is the ultimate movie. I think this is one of those tests where if you're out somewhere and someone says this movie sucks, you're like the whole group is going to be like, yo, whoa, like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it's because I think it's from top to bottom, from the smallest, simplest things to, moving to the characters, to they're dressed, to the macro of the entire story and how it's structured and where the act break is in the middle, where the intermission is. Like, it's such a perfect time to both not lose momentum, but also give you a little bit of a breath. All that stuff is so key. And it's like every single person and the performances, even beyond, obviously, Mifune, the iconic and insane sort of wild card, but every other person is so well calibrated to each other and, like, to the group that they're in. And I love heist movies that have the getting the gang together montage, and the whole thing in here where he's got the sword and he avoids it so easily as he's walking through the shop. Like, that stuff is it's just incredible. And again, like, it's a movie that's, like, I don't know that any of us are going to have anything super original to say about it. But it's just so special. And, like, that's, like, why movies exist, is to tell a story that can grasp on this sort of a stage and this sort of scale. It's like nothing else.
Yeah, I said Yojimbo was my favorite. This is definitely 1A though, and I mean, Yojimbo is my favorite, but this is his best. I don't think there's any contest there. It just, again, it is 3.5 hours long, but it's so perfectly structured. Just the way it's divided. The first third is getting the gang together. The second third is them coalescing with the villagers, and then the third The third act is the battle, and everyone kind of builds on each other, but at the same time, they're kind of their own self-contained stories. The way Paul was talking about, just the way how real it feels with the movement and the background. The characters in this movie, I judge movies a lot by side characters and how well fleshed out they are. And so many smaller characters in this movie have complete arcs. The villagers and things like that, the relationships with the samurai and how those grow and develop, and that just makes this movie feel so real and this world feel so lived in.
And it's character through action, not character through exposition. It's not just like, well, 20 details about this person, so look, they're a deep character. It's like, what does this person do when their life or someone else's life is on the line? How do they react when these life or death circumstances come upon them? And that's what character is about, and especially in an action movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't care about what you say this person does or has done. What are we seeing them do? And that's everything the movie does.
Yeah, there's no waste of time in this movie. I mean, for as long as it is, there's no waste of time. There's no, there's no scene you're like, oh man, just shut up and move on to the next thing. Everything it's just constant momentum. And the character, especially the main character, some of this, we talked about Shakespeare, some of the adaptations. This feels so Shakespearean to me. I think the characters are written that way. The dialogue. There's the one scene where the character is introduced chopping wood, and there's that wordplay where he's talking about cutting the wood, and he's talking about cutting with a sword, and kind of playing out. And that's right out of Shakespeare to me.
The Russo Bros said in Captain America: Civil War, that's what they were thinking when they had Captain America chopping the wood. They're like, I was thinking Seven Samurai.
Nice.
That was in my head. Yeah.
But yeah, it's such a perfect. I mean, it's 3.5 hours long. That's why I don't get to it as often as I want to, just because that the actual commitment of time. Not that it's something I don't want to do, but 3.5 hours, it's hard to cut that time out of your day. But I mean, this is a 3.5 hour movie I go back to a lot more.
And you can't just watch part of it. It's like once you're watching part of it, it's like, fuck, I guess we're watching like you can't just do it in pieces.
Yeah, it sucks you
even
in.
movies I love.
But I mean, any other 90. If you name a 3.5 hour movie, if I tell you I've seen it, I'm probably never going to watch it again. This one I will get back to as often as I possibly can, because that's how much there is to it.
One quick thing that I forgot to mention, I love the introduction to the character of Kyuzo, played by Seiji Miyaguchi. I just love how calm he is in his duel. Then how that plays off. I don't know, it's such a quiet contrast to some of the other samurai that I love that scene. Maybe the most of the movie, low-key. My favorite scene in the movie.
And I love his relationship that he develops with the younger samurai. I forget the character's name, but the mentor relationship they have there, and that's a great. Just so many different relationships going on with all these different characters, and they all talk to each other different. They all treat each other different. It just feels so real.
I'm a big fan of Toshiro Mifune's bare ass cheeks.
All right, everybody talked about Seven Samurai. We got that out of the way. Joseph, what is your number one?
My number one is Ron.
All right.
Once again, Shakespeare coming into play. This time based off of King Lear, and once again Tatsuya Nakadai. This man is incredible. This movie is one of the most gorgeous movies. Not just war movies, but any movie ever made. I love the technical scale of the colors and the costuming. I originally watched this last year for the feature presentation trivia watch challenge. Watch an Oscar winner for best costume design, and there's so much more to it that I couldn't help but fall in love with. The frames of this movie, like any frame could be a painting, and it's incredible. The movie. So here's one way that I can talk about this one scene, that the first big battle sequence, I think, is so abrupt to how the first hour or so came before it that it's mesmerizing to me, and so much more impactful than so many other war movies do, and keep on going, not losing any momentum from having their best opening battle scene, and then later losing a little bit of that momentum looking at you Saving Private Ryan. But I love how the Shakespeare tropes come into play in this movie, and how that builds onto that inherent tragedy about how war destroys everyone. That one scene where Tatsuya Nakadai's character, Lord Hidetora Ichimonji, is wandering through those long blades of grass, and they're like blowing around in the wind. That's just one of my favorite moments in any movie ever. It's incredible. The lady, hold on,
Kaide?
The,
Not Lady Kaide.
yes, I think she is really great and very mesmerizing. All the actors are mesmerizing, but the villains in this movie really stuck out to me by I like the acting because I like how theatrical it is, how Shakespeare, because it's based on Shakespeare, so I like those touches to it. It's mesmerizing to me.
Oh yeah, I'll go next.
was your 2, right?
Yeah, this was my number 2. Yeah, I think I don't use this word often because I think it's kind of overused, but this movie is fucking epic. Like, you can see why it was like. I can understand why this was, even though it's not my favorite job from him as a director. I think it's definitely like top tier, and I can understand why this was like his Oscar nomination. But even though he definitely should have got it for Seven Samurai and won, but I mean, this is like. There's just so many like amazing moments. Like the scale of this movie is just insane. Like it just looks so expensive. Like there's some certain battle sequence. Like again, there's one where it's one of my favorite moments in like all of his filmography, where Lord Ichimonji is inside of the temple well. There's like these flaming arrows being shot into it, and he's just sitting there quietly as all this stuff is going around him, and then like. There's like just a pause in the action, then he just walks out and it's just complete silence. Like everyone just falls completely still and it's complete silence as they watch him just walk out. It's like one of the most like, it's like one of those scenes that just gives me like goosebumps when I watch it. It's like so many amazing moments like that. And yeah, it's just a phenomenal movie. Can't really say much more without echoing what everyone else said.
This is number 3. I don't have an original take in this at all. I concur. It's epic. I mean, never has a movie started so green and lush, and it has turned into not that by the end. Like, there's like this is the only Kurosawa movie that like I was genuinely shocked by just like how violent it is. Like this movie is so like intense, especially those. Excuse me. Especially I said that, Seventh Samurai was pretty bleak, but man, like not even remotely close. Yeah, this movie's an epic. I'm not gonna belabor the point. Yeah, one of my favorites. I need to revisit this really soon. I haven't seen it in so long. I don't even know why I put it number 3, but yeah. I'm doing a great job today, guys. Happy to be here.
You're doing fine, John. You're here. You made it here.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about Mansai Nomura's character, the blind uncle, who is like one of like these, like it's sort of like a funny outlier character in Kurosawa, just this insane blind man who has these crazy visions, and I just love his chaotic energy that he brings to the movie. Yeah, I mean the like 9-minute castle siege sequence is like one of the great action sequences to me in the history of cinema. Like the way that the sound is sort of taken out at certain points, and it's just the clanking of footsteps or the sound of people having their throats slit. Like they said, the scale in this is just ridiculous. Maybe some of the greatest things that Coppola and Lucas ever did was helping get this movie funded, honestly. Yeah, to take King Lear and to pull it into this period of Japan's history too, I think is like not insignificant, I think, and to return to Shakespeare, I think, after 25 years of telling other different types of stories is not a mistake. I think as Kurosawa sort of aged, and this is one of I'm reading his autobiography now, and this is one of the movies he talks about the most, just because of how much it took out of him as a person and as a filmmaker to make these sequences at the age that he was when he made it. Like, imagine making this at this age is crazy. It's like Ridley Scott making the last duel sort of type of energy, I think there. But yeah, like taking these three men and, you know, putting them at odds against each other. Obviously they're brothers and everything, but you know, what people will do for power and for land, and that stuff doesn't really change over time. It just shifts into a different context, right? This is like, is this just not Succession, but in ancient Japan in a way? And yeah, like they mentioned the color stuff, and it's just like those reds and yellows and blues are just insane. Like the banners when they're arriving at the meeting at the beginning. You don't see that stuff in any kind of movie, especially not on this scale. It's like unseen and unheard of.
Yeah, that's what stuck out with me. My last rewatch is just really how brutal this movie is. I just kept thinking like Game of Thrones level brutality and just meanness. The battle scenes are great, and they don't make movies like this anymore. I mean, like literally, it's kind of movie they don't make it. This would be, you know, just all the extras and the horses and the buildings really on fire, that kind of stuff. But there's just, you know, that first battle scene where it's just extended shots of people just bleeding to death, and you know there's a shot where for 1 second there's just a guy holding his arm's missing, he's just holding his own arm and staring at it, and just got, you know, just people getting spared and just brutally murdered. And then there's one thing, I won't spoil, but there's one thing that happens at the end of this movie that only happens to punch you in the gut. Like there's no reason for it to happen other than to just punch you right in the gut. Because I actually thought I misremembered it because it had been a while since I saw it, and I thought I had misremembered it and the thing like didn't happen, and they teased it. But just the last 3 minutes of the movie, they so easily could have left this out, and it just happens. It's just so brutal. But yeah, you know, talking about how they, you know, taking Shakespeare into this part of history, what he did was he took King Lear and he as inspiration, but he also blended it with an actual characters from, or actual people from Japanese history. And I think that was a wise choice because it kind of puts a different spin on the Lear story. You know, King Lear's biggest, you know, fault is he's just foolish and he makes a bad decision. But taking this and putting it in the real world situation, the story here is now more about the chickens coming home to roost. And, you know, there's really no good people in this movie, you know, even though he's taken advantage of, and, you know, you feel bad because of the way his kids are treating him, you realize that this is not a good man. And he, you know, he kind of is just getting what he's coming, and what his children are doing to him is basically what he taught them to do. And this is like the natural recourse of the life that he's lived. So I think that's really interesting. And yeah, you guys said all the same about the cinematography, the battle scenes, everything. So good. So yeah, this is one. Actually, when I first watched it, it was a little much for me. I think I got a lot more out of it more this second rewatch. And I want to go back to it more, and I'm sure I'll get more out of it. So that brings us to Paul and your number one.
My number one is obviously the 1944 propaganda film, The Most Beautiful. My number one is sort of spoiled if you saw my t-shirt, but it's high and low. I think there are days where this is my favorite movie of all time. There are days where, you know, it's number 2 or number 3 or something, but it's always sort of in the handful. And it's like, to me, this is like the ultimate crime epic, but it's not that epic in a way. You know, it has this seemingly grand scale, but it's so filtered through the personal. As a quick aside, I'm sure this is exciting for John. He may or may not already know this, but the kid who gets kidnapped, Masahiko Shimazu, is the little shit from Good Morning, the Ozu film that is John's profile picture on Letterboxd, if anybody follows him, which is always very amusing to me to think about. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the brilliance is in the conception, right? A rich, powerful shoe executive is on the brink of this huge deal. All of his stuff, you know, his life is kind of on the line. And then all of a sudden he finds out his son is kidnapped and the man demands a ransom. But, oh, wait, maybe it's not his son. And the morality of that. But then the way that the film evolves, right, it starts almost at this sort of there's a metaphorical way you can see it, is it starts in heaven with these rich people in their own lives. It descends into sort of normal life with the police and this procedural element, and then descends furthermore into hell with the man with that kidnaps the child. And to me, it's that transition that makes it like such a masterpiece. I think it's got this great procedural element to it, which I think is really satisfying. And I think a lot of people are surprised by that maybe when they watch it. They don't realize oh, it becomes like the cops are looking for this kidnapper, and I love the way that there are like two experts on each specific aspect of the investigation. It's like they're specializing on like the phone booths, and these guys are specializing on like the stolen cars, and these guys are specializing on this. And I love the way that that all comes together, in addition to the morality play at the center of the story, which is Gondo Toshiro Mifune, which is to me in my mind the definitive character that he plays. But it's this man who started poor and then ascended to the top, and it's what will he do to maintain that, right? And it's this man who's jealous of him and wakes up every day and sees this house on a hill. And if you're this guy, you probably hate that guy too, like this rich asshole who lives, this life of luxury, and he represents everything you don't have. And it's about like what he's willing to do to obtain that himself, and how he'll debase himself and use other people. And I think, to me, one of the biggest reasons I love this so much is visually. It's just the image of the kidnapper popping his head above the grass with the sunglasses reflected in there. The sort of the closing image when those sort of bars come down after their discussion, which I think is an interesting, conversation with Bresson's Pickpocket. If anyone's seen that film, like that as a sort of counter response to that sort of ending, which Paul Schrader has done like in 7 different movies, the exact same ending. We get it. We love Pickpocket, but it's all those elements coming together in one singular piece to me that makes it so satisfying. And, when you have these interweaving dynamics of his underling who has worked with him for years, but does he want power? Does he not want power? What will he sacrifice on behalf of Mifune's character, and what will he not? And I just find every second of this enrapturing and captivating. And I showed my father this movie for the first time 2 nights ago, and it was just such a special experience for me to watch something that's a movie he had never seen, right, of this era, this contemporary version of Kurosawa, coming off the heels of Yojimbo and Senjuro. It's kind of surprising to see him flip back to the modern era, but he does it so well. I still don't know that I understand fully the symbolism of the one scene of color in the movie. I don't know that I've really cracked what that is supposed to mean.
Looks great though.
But to me, every inch of the movie is just incredible. The way that they're crouching when they're hiding from the man in the window, and all that stuff is just, it's unlike anything else. And this just is like one of the movies I think that defines my love of movies as a whole. So I think it's hard to understate how much this movie means to me overall.
All right. And John and Joseph, I think you both had this as your number 2. So you guys go ahead. Is John with us?
Maybe start with Joseph and then go to
John. Go ahead, Joseph. You start us off.
Yeah, this movie and Ron are very. Are you back, John?
Yeah. You can go though, Joseph. You've already said.
Yeah. Keep going.
All right. Yeah, this and Ron to me are his, or at least my 2 favorite Kurosawa films. The amount of detail and Paul was just naming a handful of the details that they add to this procedural drama and crime thriller for this kidnapping story is fascinating to me, and it really it's at some points overwhelming, but I love that it's a very detail oriented and it's a very detail oriented movie that just keeps me glued to the screen. And once again, we're going to talk about Toshiro Mifune and Tatsuya Nakadai, and I think the way that the movie focuses on, I like the way how in the first half it focuses on Toshiro Mifune and him trying to deal with his situation, but also having this dilemma of how he tries to prioritize his family and his business. And then later we move over to Tatsuya Nakadai, who is playing the inspector on the case. For me personally, I feel like the more movies that I see with Tatsuya Nakadai, the more I feel like this guy needs to be talked about more. It is insane to me that he has this diabolical role in Yojimbo, and then the following year he gives one of the most haunting performances I've ever seen in Harakiri, and then this movie might be the most straightforward of it, but he's still good in it as the inspector in High and Low. It's crazy to me. I think that it's just endlessly thrilling for me. The contrast between the high and the low is really frightening. That one scene, or the later scenes where they're trying to, where you see the kidnapper interacting with the low, so to speak, without giving too much away, are super haunting, but just really impactful and also really incredible in terms of how they all connect with the overall themes and the title of the movie as well. It's one of my favorite movies of all time as well.
John, this is your number 2 as well?
Oh shit. Okay, I'm already starting to break up, and I don't want to I don't want to end this show on that. So just a couple things. Number 1, Paul, I pegged you more for a Sanshiro Sugata Part 2 guy. And also, Isamu from Good Morning Ohio. That little shit is my spirit animal. Also, High and Low is another stupid thing. High and Low, it's like there are a lot of Japanese actors. Well, I guess like that's sort of ecosystem. There are a lot of people, but like a lot of people, like small actors from like my favorite Japanese films are in it. Like Tsutomu Yamazaki, who is like weirdly more handsome in this movie than Toshiro Mifune. Like just personal opinion. Like he's in Tempopo, which is another favorite of mine. You guys said this has happened a lot tonight, but you guys have said a lot of the things that I loved about it. This is the only movie in this panel that I watched for the first time and included on the list. And, there's a lot to be said about the movie's capitalist critique. There's a lot to be said about the sort of how it pivots into the police procedural and how the movie sort of folds inwards on itself to show how people, like how society, to put it, one of my friends on Letterboxd put it so eloquently, to criminalize people on the margins, how society criminalizes people on the margins. There's a lot to say there, but I guess I'll end with a superlative because that's just kind of a Kurosawa way. I watched this movie the first time a couple weeks ago, and there are very few movies that I watch where it's just like so obviously a masterpiece, just like so early on. It was like that with Seven Samurai when I was in 9th grade. It was like that recently with Dragon Inn and with Throwdown, and with this, I could definitely see this becoming like my favorite. Seven Samurai is great. Again, it, like Paul said, like it has that reputation and it has the laurels formally that just like you could call it the best ever. But to me, this movie is probably just textually everything. It's probably one of his most accomplished pieces of film ever. One of just like the most accomplished pieces of film art that I've seen. So, very obviously a masterpiece. I cannot wait to revisit it. I'm breaking up, so I need to go. Okay.
Right, you got it all in there. Good. I rewatched this just this past week.
No, he alluded to it earlier. We'll get it.
I rewatched this. The first time I watched this didn't really stick with me. Second time, I really connected with it more. I love just how literal the title is. The first half is high, the second half is low. The first half is. I also enjoy how it's not. It's a thrill, like the thriller of can we get the kid back, but it's also that eternal struggle of the decision that Gongo is going to make. Is he going is going to do the right thing or not? So I think you have all that going on there, and that tension just builds and builds and builds and builds, and then that resolves itself, and you're like, okay, where's the movie going to go here? And then it kind of pivots there, becomes more that procedural, and it's just as intense, just in a different way. I love those scenes, and I'm not a big police procedural guy. Usually those movies kind of turn me off, but this one just paced so well. I love those scenes in the police headquarters, what Paul alluded to, where it's like, hey, okay, you're following up on this. So what's going on with that? Okay, where are we at on this? Just and everybody, it's basically just it's an exposition of it's like, okay, we went here, this happened, this happened. But somehow the way they present it is so interesting, so much fun. And the visuals, like you said, the sunglasses, it's just a great character design for that villain, and especially after you've been waiting to see him for so long.
Him with the red carnation in his pocket when he's walking around, like near the end of the movie too.
Yeah.
Like the wrapping on his hand, all the little details like that.
Yeah.
And then one thing, sorry, real quick, I forgot to mention is, I love that there are certain scenes where nobody can make eye contact with each other. Everyone's just staring at the floor as they talk.
Yeah.
Especially when Mifune is like yelling. There's characters all throughout the scene, especially in their house, where there would be someone sitting on the couch, someone standing by the window, someone standing over here, and they're all sort of just eyes frozen, trained at the ground, because they can't make eye contact. They can't see eye to eye, and it's like that tension is like you could poke through with a knife.
And everybody, just even like the what do they call it? Boston? Is that the one?
Boston.
The bald guy. Yeah. just
Those they make
so,
fun of when they're like,
yeah. Like there's just some, and,
Like a cop.
you get the feeling like these are again real characters. You know, like they've worked together a long time, they know each other, and that just plays so well. And Mifune is great. Like just this comes just a few years after The Bad Sleep Well. And just to see those two characters, how different that is, he's so great. And like John was saying, how it's like a critique of capitalism, but at the same time, the capitalist is a pretty sympathetic figure, which I think is just such a nice, nuanced way to do it. You know, it's not the obvious way that a lot of people present that. So yeah, there's a lot. This is another one I'm going to go back to again. I watched this. To be honest with you, Paul, I knew how much you love this, and I was like, oh, is it really that great? But this time, it really caught on for me, and I want to go back to it again. Dylan, you did not have this. Tell us your story for ILO.
Right. So I personally, this is just a weird. I don't think there's objectively like really anything wrong with this movie. It might, like, if I were making this list objectively, it would probably be pretty high. But in terms of my favorites, I'm not super. Well, I wouldn't say the low part of the film, like the second act of the, or not act, but the second half of the film is like bad by any means. It's just, for me, I think the first half, like the high part, is like so good and like so great that is like once it switches and becomes like just the police procedural, I'm not as crazy about it. I'm still with it. Like I still think it's really well done, but not really my genre, I guess, police procedurals. But I still think there's like some amazing like moments in it. Like I mentioned earlier about how Kurosawa is just like a really optimistic filmmaker, and I feel like there's some moments in here with I'm gonna try to tap dance around without giving away anything, but where it's like characters are like rewarded in a sense for making like the moral decisions in ways that you don't often see in movies with this dark subject matter, in a way that I think it's in a way that feels very like natural and very well done, where like people are like very complex, and obviously like the Mifune's character is not a great man, but really at the beginning of the film at all. But it's like, yeah, he just watching like I almost spoiled the movie right there. Can we give away the middle part of the movie that happens? I'm trying really hard to move around it. I don't know. But yeah, I think this movie is great, just not personally in my 10 favorites. It was my 10, but Dersu's all that knocked it off. But
honestly, I could see that take where the second half just doesn't live up to the first, because that first is so strong. I enjoy it, but I can definitely see someone coming at it from that angle. Okay, so that is the show. Let's do our combined top 10 off of everybody's list. 10 Bad Sleep Well, 9 Starry Dog, Gray Dog, 8 Dersu Uzala, 7 is Kagemusha, 6 Throne of Blood, 5 Akira, 4 High Low, 3 Yojimbo, 2 Ran, 1 Seven Samurai. So for the most part, looks pretty.
That's exactly my top 3.
So I got to give out grades. Everybody gets an A. Oh, good, John's back. Everybody gets an A. It's Kurosawa. You're picking Kurosawa movies. There's no way you can't succeed on that. I am contractually obligated to name a winner, or at least rank your lists. I'm not going to say winners or losers. I'm just going to rank the lists. So this is splitting hairs at this point, so don't take anything here I say too much to heart. I think I'm going to give Dylan first place just because he had Yojimbo and Seven Samurai in his top 3, and he had Matadeo on his list, and recency bias. I just watched that last night, so I'm gonna put Dylan number 1. I'll give Paul second because he's the only one who had Sanjuro, and I really like Sanjuro. I will give John number 3 because he had Yojimbo and Seven Samurai pretty high, and I like the rest of his list as well. And Joseph is 4th just because somebody else is coming 4th. But they were all solid lists. And I appreciate you guys all being here. I love doing this. I know we didn't have probably the live chat that we wanted, but I hopefully a lot of people watch this on the rerun. And I'd like to do more kind of auteur, maybe a little deep dive episodes like this. Not necessarily be hosting, but I'd definitely like to see more shows.
Johnny Toe with me and John over here.
Dude, so fucking do that in a heartbeat. Holy shit.
Hopefully we can do that again. But again, remember, stay tuned. Next week starts Koho's musical top 40. Great panel for that. That's gonna be a lot of fun all month through August. Then we'll take a couple weeks regular shows, and Top 100 Scenes starts in the fall. If you're interested in that, please let me know. You don't have to have a list ready today, but at least let me know you're interested. We can talk about who our fourth panelist so far. It is Cody, it is Jake and Jake Mayangoni, and it is Scott Harvey, our three. Yeah. So we need one more. If you'd like that to be you, let us know, and we'll see what we can do. Until then, thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, John. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Koho behind the scenes. And we will see you next week.
You're not going to intimidate me. I'm entitled to my opinion.
Drunk and angry. Come on, break the lousy cup. Ow! I hit my arm.
And not expect everybody to do everything.
I'm going there soon, you know.
Is that so? Where are you going?
Uruguay.
Well, you go Uruguay and I'll go mine.